fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery with your hosts, Eric Shapiro, David North Martino, John Copenhaver, and Al Warren. Heard on KCAA 106.5 FM Los Angeles,
102.3 FM Riverside,
and 105.0 AM Palm Springs.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery on KCAA 106.5 FM in Los Angeles, and of course 1050 AM in Palm Springs. I'm Al Warren, Mr. Joe Goldberg. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm admit to being distracted. Just too much great sports going on. Too much NCAA, wrestling, basketball. I do my best thinking books when I'd rather be thinking basketball.
You got books to write. You got people to talk to, places to be. Not, you watch basketball after midnight.
And I violated the Connor Sullivan rules. I like to talk about that because he doesn't do it. I just did all day today, which is distract myself trying to write. So,
well, that's all right. We won't tell him. He's not here. Don't worry.
He won't listen. He's not listening.
He's not listening. He's busy. He's distracted.
He's
writing. Well, that's who we've got. We've got another great writer this week. Here we go. So Mr. Connor Sullivan's got a new book out called Wolf Trap, a thriller. So thank you for being here, Connor.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Connor, you are one of those guys that wanted to be a writer, like right from the get-go. We talked to a lot of writers in this field, and a lot of them were lawyers or doing something else, and then they turned into a writer of thrillers and things like that. But you've been someone that always wanted to be a writer.
Yeah, pretty much since I was probably 19, 20. Before that, I wanted to be a professional skier. Ended up breaking my leg pretty good, and that kind of ruined those dreams. So it was, around 19, 20, that's when I kind of shifted gears and focused on being a writer.
You went to school, right? You focused on writing in school? Yeah.
I went to University of Southern California, went to film school, majored in creative writing and screenwriting. And, did that for 4 years, and then came out and then did the Hollywood thing in LA and decided that wasn't really for me and moved back to Montana where I grew up. And that's where I am right now.
Did reading all those scripts and screenplays when you're in Hollywood help with your writing currently?
Oh, 100%. I always say that was actually my real schooling, was being a script reader for 2 or 3 years. Read thousands of scripts, figured out how story works, how it didn't work. You can read a lot of scripts in a day. A book's a lot bigger, but with a script, I could read 3 or 4 a day, and that's where I learned everything, in my opinion, looking back on it.
Is there like a formula to it? But, a lot of the scripts that you read for Hollywood and the series and shows and stuff, isn't there a lot of formula put it together in a certain way?
Yeah, kind of. For what it did for me, though, is it just taught me story. It's how to write stories efficiently. Just because, if you look at a script, it's kind of like the skeleton of a story, whereas like a novel is like the full body. You have everything going on in the novel. And the script is just, kind of like the pure story. That's like the skeleton almost of the novel. That's the way I look at it.
So what do you think the most important thing is in a novel for you?
What is the most important? Well, for thrillers, I try to write my thrillers as page turny as possible. It's 2023, everyone's addicted to their phone. They have so many distractions. I try, when I'm writing, I try to, make sure the reader wants to turn the page, wants to go to the next chapter, so that's kind of what I really focus on.
Well, do you write visually, since movies, screenplays are visual things, and do you write your books that way?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, most people with my first novel, Sleeping Bear, I had so many people say, it played in my head like a movie. And that was, a very high compliment. I do see my novels in my head like they are a movie. That might have been just from my, that early training with screenwriting.
You assign actors' faces to your characters?
I don't. I know some writers that do that. I don't do that. To me, they're people in my head, but yeah, I've never done that. And I have some friends that definitely cast their characters with real actors, but yeah, I've never done that.
Well, then how do you experience your characters then? What do you actually see them, but just develop your own sort of what they look like in your own mind?
Yeah, for sure. They kind of just come to me, and then, as I work on the character development of the character, draft after draft, they start to become more real, and I start to know them a lot better. That's how I do see them, in my head. I know what they look like. I know how they act. But it definitely takes a while. It's not like the first draft is, they're pretty much like cardboard cutouts in a first draft. And then by the third draft, they're more real.
So what do you build out first? Do you build out your characters, or do you build out the plot? Or you plot it or pants it?
I'm a little bit of both. I plot when I need to plot. I pants when I need to pants. My third book that I'm writing right now, I'm doing more of an outline to it. But in terms of character, yeah, I would say my first book, it was character first. Even with Wolf Trap, my book that just came out the other day, I definitely had my protagonist, Brian Rome, in my head. I knew who he was, but then, it's more of a plot driven book than a character driven book, I would say. There's a lot of characters in it, but there's a lot of plot happening to those characters.
And Wolf Trap is a series, right? Going to be a series?
Yep. It's the beginning of the series. I'm writing the sequel right now.
Did you plot out the series before you started it?
Yes, a little bit. The first 3 books.
Uh-huh.
So I know where the first 3 are going, and I have an idea, if they're selling and I get to keep going with it, I know, what 4 and 5 are going to look like, in broad strokes, but nothing that specific.
Well, so do you have like a subtext or kind of an idea underneath the story or the storyline for the whole series? Is there something you want the reader to take away from any of the books like Wolf Trap or any of the future ones, or is this complete entertainment?
It's both. I do view my books more as entertainment. I wouldn't say I'm writing literature. That said, I do have themes in the books that I would like audiences to latch on to. In the first book, it was more of like family dynamics and dealing with past trauma and how the family kind of, deals with that going forward throughout the novel. Wolf Trap is, I took a lot of real world, scenarios or things that have happened in the last couple of years, geopolitically, politically, and I kind of just put them into a book, extrapolating and kind of tweaking real life events to, fictionalize them a little bit. But, it'd be great if my readership was like, oh, I know what that's from. That's just like, X, Y, and Z that I've been seeing in the news. So,
well, that's my next question. Did you like, Sleeping Bear? That's kind of a story of the Alaska wilderness, right? The place where people get lost. You turn that into a full thriller. Is that how I remember it? It's been a while since I read it.
Yeah. It's kind of, I describe it as, a woman goes missing in the woods thriller, and it turns into, a geopolitical spy thriller, which I've never seen before. And that terrified me when I was writing it, just because I was like, I'm messing with 2 genres here that have never really, gone together. But it seemed to work out. People seem to respond very well to it.
And the second book is environmental current events. That's taken from the headlines too.
Yeah, I have some environmental current events. It kind of centers around the Saudi royal family, centers around the Jamal Khashoggi murder. I took kind of all those real world events and, again, tweaked them and extrapolated like what could have happened, and just put it into this big geopolitical thriller.
At what point do you take the current events, things are happening in the real world, and say, you know what, I'm a fiction writer. I don't need to be perfect on this. I can be a fiction writer.
Yeah. And I definitely had to do that. I think going into it, I was naive saying, you know, oh, I'm going to kind of just make it so like real world is mirrored in my fiction. But at a certain point, I was like, you know what, this is my universe. You know, I need to, in order for the plot to work, I do have to change some things. I do have to, you know, manipulate this here and there. And that's what's so much fun about writing fiction, is that you can do that.
Plus, I guess, you know, when you're doing fiction, you also get the outcome. You get to decide on the, you know, how justice is served.
Yeah, exactly. And that was kind of fun about writing Wolf Trap, is that, you know, I don't want to spoil anything, but it's, you know, what would happen if, you know, kind of Jamal Khashoggi was warned right before, and how would that work out? So that was fun to tinker around with.
Are you careful on what side you take in cases like that? You know, when they're so political like that, when there can be two defined reasons or you know, ideas behind an assassination like that. Do you sort of stay away from going either way?
Yeah, I like to show both sides. You know, even with, you know, in Wolf Trap, it kind of centers around the theme of climate change, right? And I have a president who is, you know, this very hard-hitting kind of progressive who is going to do anything she can to stop climate change in its tracks. And the people kind of opposing that are going, you know, let's look at this realistically. What would that do to our economy in the world global economy? And that's kind of, all those themes are kind of explored. So, you know, I never pick a side. You know, I even say in the book, you know, some of my main characters are like, you know, they hate politics, the left, the right. It's irrelevant. You know, at the end of the day, you know, we're Americans, and we should be coming together, not completely fighting all the time.
Well, is that because you're thinking of your reader? Or I guess the question would be, how much do you think of your reader when you're actually writing?
You know, I do think of the reader a little bit, but I also kind of have those views. You know, you look at the extremes on each side, and it's like, in my opinion, that's kind of the problem in our country right now, is these huge two extremes. And, you know, I think we have a lot more in common than we're all willing to admit. So I like to kind of show both sides in my work.
Yeah, a lot of it's the communication and stuff, and the way we talk. A lot of people don't talk in person, and that leaves a big hole. And so all sorts of things can be said and done about each other, right? It's sort of a mess.
Exactly.
You know, you can't win there. You know, what do you think the most important thing is in a book? For you, when you're reading a book, what is it that does it for you?
For me personally, it's the emotional kind of toll that a book will take on me, whether, you know, a good emotion, a bad emotion. But, you know, we've all read the books where it's just, you know, cardboard characters. It doesn't really, you finish it and it might have been entertaining, but there wasn't really like the heart to it. And I really like books that make me think and, you know, make me feel an emotion that I wouldn't otherwise feel. And those are definitely the type of books that I really enjoy.
How do you find that heart in these characters that you're creating? You
know, it's hard. So, you know, when I was writing my first book, Sleeping Bear, I think in, you know, one of my later drafts, I realized, you know, I need more, you know, kind of emotional gut punches here for my audience, my readership, to get invested in the characters. You know, and I have a scene probably at page 70 or so in Sleeping Bear where, you know, I have a lot of people who email me a couple times a week, and they're like, oh, I love that scene. It was so real. It was so kind of heart wrenching. And it really like, it shows what my characters are willing to do for their family when someone is in trouble. And, you know, writing that was once I got that scene down, and I could, when I was rereading it, I could feel it. You know, you kind of get goosebumps in a way, not because my writing was great or whatever, but just because it was like, oh, like that's a real human emotion. And we've all kind of gone through that at some point in our lives with our loved ones. So, hopefully, I did it correctly enough. I do get emails every week about it. So I must have done something right.
Did that scene that you're talking about just happen, or it came during the creative process, or did you say, I think this is going to be a good scene. Let me write that down. Was it spontaneous or was it planned? Sort of a question.
It kind of was spontaneous. And then once I kind of realized, once the idea came to me and it went down on paper, I was like, oh, I can really expand on that. I can keep going with it. And that was kind of planned, like making it better from what the original drafts were.
So when you said when you find that hard, like when you wrote that scene, how is it when you're writing people that you don't like, or characters that are, let's say, evil or doing the wrong thing, and that, how do you find that, feeling that where people will believe them?
Yeah. I can't remember who said this. Some writer said this I think it was actually Taylor Sheridan, said in an interview years and years ago, you shouldn't just have good guys and bad guys. Like, there are evil, you should have, characters who are, evil, but they should have good qualities about them, because there's very few people in this world who are just pure evil, right? So you should be showing more of a well-rounded person. They might be great to their family, but they're, horribly evil to, maybe someone else. And that's something that I'm cognizant of as I'm growing as an author. I do want to, make sure that my antagonists are just as well-rounded as my protagonists. And that just takes a lot of practice and a lot of work. And, I'm trying to get better at it as the books keep coming out. But it's always about growing.
Well, that's true. And that kind of leads me to my next sort of question is, I got Sleeping Bear, and I felt that the setting was almost as much of a character as the characters themselves. Do you take setting as an important element as you're writing along?
Yeah, I really do. And in Sleeping Bear, I get those emails a lot. Everyone says, your Alaska setting was like a character in and of itself. And I said, oh, thank you. That's kind of what I was going for. Or, in Wolf Trap, everyone likes the Montana scenes, where the book starts out. And, that's just a kind of a reflection of, where I live, and kind of like a love letter to where I live. And, the environments that I surround myself with in my daily life, I love to put into my books, because, I can definitely tell a reader, who lives, say, in like New York City, what it's like living in Montana through my books, or like what it's like in Alaska. And I think it's really cool for, people who haven't really, witnessed that in their real lives, but they're able to experience it through my books. Is great. So
do you have a favorite character that you write?
You mean do I have a favorite, like, looking back on my books, do I have like a favorite character out of all of them?
Yeah. Is there someone that's it's kind of your favorite, like, that you like a lot? I
really like my Jim Gale character in Sleeping Bear. I like my Brian Rome character, who's my protagonist in my new book, Wolf Trap. I would say the most fun character to write, though, was my antagonist in Sleeping Bear, Viktor Sokolov, this old Russian SVR spy. And he's very evil. He didn't have much, good qualities about him, but man, he was so much fun to write.
So what was fun about him? Because he just his evil stuff. He didn't, because he had no good qualities. So
yeah, he was just eccentric, liked to drink, liked to smoke. He just was kind of at the end of his life, and he just didn't really care what was going on. He was pretty much pure evil at that point. It was just so much fun to write.
So let me ask you, I know that you've wanted to be a writer since you were a skier, but why? Why do you write? Is it a compulsion? Is it a business? Is it I want to tell stories? What is it that makes Connor write?
It's this, I have to be creative in some way. And for me, my creativity is basically creating stories. I'm constantly daydreaming throughout the day, all the time. It's just how my brain works. And I have to be productive with it, or it just kind of drives me crazy. It almost makes me depressed if I'm not creating, through storytelling, through writing. So it's just like, I would say it's almost like a compulsion, if I don't get my writing done in my week, my goals, I just feel like crap. I always just want to, have written, and I do enjoy the writing process a lot. Obviously it can be very difficult. Kind of feels like just endlessly chopping wood, but it is nice to, after a month of hard writing, to look back and see what you've done. It makes me so happy.
I got to take lessons from you because I find writing hard. I think the discipline I find hard.
Yeah. And I try to be very open with this, with people, with aspiring writers, I do tell them, it is really, really, really hard. I mean, I would not trade it for any other job. But that being said, it can be unbelievably difficult. And I think that, for aspiring writers, not enough, very serious published writers or very, well acclaimed or best-selling writers, they don't really talk about how hard it is. So I always try to, say that it is, because, behind closed doors, when I'm talking to my friends who are, big time novelists, they all say the same thing. It's so hard. It's so difficult. No one knows what it's like unless you do it. So I try to be very vocal about that.
Well, how do you get through the hard if it doesn't come to you naturally?
I get through it just by showing up. I mean, you guys are both authors. Like, there's just some days where it isn't working. But if you show up and you can get at least something on paper and you trust yourself and that eventually you will figure that problem out. I always write myself into a corner, and, you can ask my wife, like, sometimes it takes me a week or two to get out of that corner. And it's brutal. I don't want to be, in that position of uncomfortableness. But, whether it's my conscious or my subconscious, I do, find a way out. So, when I was a young aspiring writer, I would just get so upset that, I can't figure this out. This isn't working. Now I'm learning to trust myself a little bit more, that, I will come up with a solution. Just give it, some time and let it come out naturally. And it's been working so far.
That's when you take the dog for a walk, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And I do all sorts of stuff. Like I'll step away. I take my dogs on a hike. I always just do something outside. I go shoot my bow. That's like a big meditative thing for me. It calms me down, lets me think, about something other than writing, kind of get my conscious working. And then I'll go back in the afternoon, usually those problems will be figured out just by stepping away for a couple hours.
Yeah, it's relaxing. Let's show on the other side of the bow coming at you, right?
Yeah.
Look out. Connor's thinking, whop.
How does each book change you?
How does each book change me? Well, I've only written 2 books. The first book changed me because I would say it was the first thing in my life I put kind of everything on the line for. I didn't really have a backup plan with my life. I wanted to be a novelist, and I kind of put all my eggs in one basket. So it changed me by, when I finished, I was obviously very grateful that I was able to finish a novel. But it gave me the self-confidence that I could do it again. They always say you have your whole life to write your first novel and then a year to write your second. If you're an author and you sign a deal with a publishing house, they usually get you in a 2-book deal. They want you to produce the second one as fast as possible. So when I finished Sleeping Bear and I signed with Simon & Schuster, I had 12 months to write Wolf Trap, and Wolf Trap's a big, big book. There's a lot of moving parts in it. I wanted to really get out of my comfort zone and, try something that was not easy. And it was the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. I was writing pretty much all day for a year, every day almost. And, I learned a lot about myself and kind of my belief systems. When things are going great, you publish your first novel, you can say, oh, well, look at me, hard work and dedication. Look where this gets you. And then, I'm in the trenches writing my second novel and I got a deadline. So, all those belief systems were tested, and I just kind of had to, adhere to them. and kind of practice what I preach. And, it ended up working. So I was very, very lucky, very fortunate for that.
Well, as being the novelist, acquiring the dream, lived up to your dream so far? Lived up to what you expected?
Yeah. I mean, it feels like I'm living in a dream, I'm lucky enough where I don't have to have a day job anymore. I write full time. And that's it. That's also kind of a double-edged sword. And I can't remember which author told me that. They said, "Oh yeah, you'll see once you're writing full time, that's almost just as hard as writing with a day job." I mean, I used to write in the mornings, go to work, and then write at night. And that's kind of how I wrote Sleeping Bear. And then all of a sudden I had all this time to write Wolf Trap, and, procrastination just kicks in, and cause you're like, oh, I have all this time. It shouldn't be that hard. And then, you're on the internet and 4 hours passes, and then you realize you got to go write. So I'm very diligent now with my time. If it's my writing time, my phone is not in the room with me. I'm not on the internet, and I'm just writing. And that's one thing I really learned writing Wolf Trap, my second book.
And that's what I was talking about at the beginning. I violated that rule big time today.
Yeah.
Phone, internet, basketball, wrestling. My head exploded, and I was trying to write.
I know. And I'm not saying I'm perfect either. I can't.
Yes, you are.
Distracted. I mean, it's fun when you got, all sorts of, you got your agents calling you and, Hollywood stuff going on. It's just, it's exciting. And then all of a sudden you realize that you haven't written that day because you've been fielding calls and doing emails and all that stuff. So I have to really guard my time.
Yeah. Procrastination is my best hobby. I got that one down.
Oh, me too. And I do believe at a certain point, to a certain point, procrastination is part of the writing process. Writing isn't just typing. Writing is thinking about your book before you're going to bed, or, coming up with an idea when you wake up, and procrastinating. Your subconscious is still kind of working, but you gotta value your time when it is time to put words on paper.
And I just read an article about procrastination was in it, and it said it's actually it's a psychological, not disorder or whatever it is. It's how dealing with stress and anxiety. It's one of the symptoms of stress and anxiety, procrastination. So I'm all in on that. Double thumbs up.
Well, I think it's important sometimes you just need it. Just like, going for the walk or doing whatever it is to change the energy around you, right? I find that I got to have a lot of things going. So I'll have, TVs running and music playing and dogs doing whatever. And the anxiety is what helps create my atmosphere to write. But I'm writing about serial killers. So I'm in a different world.
Anxiety there. Yeah.
But this leads me to the next question of, how do you regulate that in a sense of, when things are causing emotional, like if it's stressful, like when you're writing about this sort of subject, in the last couple of years, you can say honestly that, with the pandemic and politics and all this stuff going on, there's endless enough things that could be stressful and upsetting. How is it that you can focus on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to get across emotionally when you've got emotional toll like this going on just around you?
Yeah. For me, when I was writing Sleeping Bear, my first book, I deleted all social media from my life. That's
my chest.
Yeah. Well, no, I know now that the app, if you have an Apple iPhone, it'll tell you on Sunday mornings how much screen time you averaged a day. I remember probably back in 2016 when I was really getting serious about my writing career. I was kind of keeping track of how many hours I was just, scrolling on my phone or just not writing. And it was 3 or 4 hours. And, it was probably much more. That was just kind of what I was recording down. And then I just kind of had to be like, all right, well, what do you want more? Do you want to be on, Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, or do you want to be a novelist, and I wanted to be a novelist. So I slowly started deleting apps over the course of like a month until I had nothing really. And then I wrote my book in that next year and a half. And then the funny thing is when I got published, your publicist, the marketing team, they want you to get right back on social media.
Yeah.
Now they get to that one.
Yeah. So then that was something. So then I'm trying to be very strict with what I'm looking at and what I'm consuming. After probably this week and next week, once all the publicity's wrapping up for Wolf Trap, I'll just delete the apps again out of my phone. I'll still have them on my computer, and I'll look at it probably once a day, but it just doesn't need to be in my life when I'm trying to, write on a deadline, which I am again. So
I think so. I think it's best just once a day in the morning or something, and then get on with your writing and stuff, right? What's your research process? How much research do you put into something like this?
I do an unbelievable amount of research. If I'm being brutally honest, it's just a form of procrastination. When I was researching Sleeping Bear, I didn't know anything about Russia, let alone Russian intelligence. So I went down the rabbit hole of reading every book I could. When I was writing Sleeping Bear, I had no money at that time. I couldn't even afford to, drive up to Alaska and see what that part of Alaska was like. So I was watching, reality, TV shows like Alaska State Troopers. I was cold calling, Alaska State Troopers, the Alaska Bureau of Investigation, just seeing how things work up there, and, with Wolf Trap, I had to really do a deep dive into Middle Eastern politics, specifically Saudi Arabian politics, the House of Saud. So I read so much, getting acquainted with it. And yeah, I wasted months of the writing process, just, never kind of looking up from the books I was reading.
Well, let me put two and two together here. Al's research question is, I procrastinate by having the internet on while I'm writing, because something will come up and say, oh, I need to know if that's blue, green, red, or, whatever it might be. So I stop writing, go out and do the quick research, and then come back.
Yeah.
Sounds like you get all the research done in advance, or do you do that game too?
I do both. So I'll get it all done in advance. So I'll have a very kind of clear idea of where I'm going. But let's say like the other day I was writing a scene in New York City. So, my character's kind of going around Manhattan. I had to see what the street looks like on Google Views. And then I had to see, if I'm on top of this hotel, can I see, the One World Trade Center? Can I see the Empire State Building? Like, where are they? So I do some of that stuff. One thing I'm really trying during book 3 is, I wasted so much time in book 2 researching and not kind of getting the story out first. Now I'm writing this first draft of book 3. And when I don't know something like, what the street view of that street in Manhattan looks like, I'll just write like TK, to go back, and I'll highlight it. So I know during the editing process, I'll go back and I'll fill all that in. But in terms of just getting the chapter out or getting, the scene out, I will now just write it fully through, and then I go back and spruce it up a little bit.
Yes, I write parenthesis, capital letters, more parenthesis, put it in red, and just move on. Just because I can stall. That is exactly what it is. I think I'll start researching for an hour and a half on this one thing, because that's much more fun than trying to write this next sentence.
Exactly.
Is there a time that the book is done? Because you could keep on changing. You keep on kind of going, well, maybe I should do this, or maybe I should add this, or I need to explain this. Like, there's always those questions of level, especially when you're dealing with this. How much information do you give, and how much is too much? Because there's a lot of questions. Is there some sort of guide you use, or a point that you just kind of go, oh, that's it, that's enough?
Yeah. With my first book, it took me 5 years to write it, and I rewrote it, 20 something times. And, once that last draft was out, I just got it to a point where I just kind of threw my hands up and said, I don't know what else to do here. This has been my life for 5 years, been working on this thing every day. I'm too close to it. I don't know if this is good or it's bad. I hadn't shown it to anyone. And then, my dad is the first person who saw it. And then he was, able to say like, oh, this, that. And then it went to agents and editors. And there's, a lot of rewriting processes in that. With Wolf Trap, I knew it was done on the date it was due to my editor. So I just, I got it as good as possible and it was sent in. And then you obviously do revisions with the publishing house. And then you do first pass, second pass, and third pass. And then then it's out in print. So
yeah, then you're out marketing and talking to people like us.
Yep.
Now, your father's Mark Sullivan, right? The author?
Yep. That's my dad.
So did he help you at all in this, or did he just give you the motivation to say, I want to be a writer too?
I always get asked that question.
I know. I hate to pull a cliche.
Oh, no,
question,
it's fine.
But
Fine.
you led into it with your last answer.
Yeah. So I don't know if this was smart, but when I was writing Sleeping Bear, he didn't see a word of it until I was done 5 years later. He never read any of my writing. He didn't even know if I was good or not. I just worked for 5 years, just trying to get better at the craft. And, he was the first person to look at it after 5 years. And, he was very impressed. He, had some great notes. But, I think having him, he's a very successful novelist, seeing his work ethic, since before I could remember, he's been a working writer since my whole life. So I saw what it takes to be a working writer, just the discipline of it. And he's incredibly disciplined. So I knew what the lifestyle was like. I knew what it took. And that's kind of, that has been invaluable for me. Because writing is not the romantic notion it's seen in movies, and everyone's always seen the writer in a TV show or a movie, and they just write a novel and it's so fun and easy. It's just the exact opposite, in my opinion. It's a lot of work.
Yeah. They all look good on the show, but okay. So what are you doing now? So can people find you on social media for a while, and do you have a website? Like where do people find Connor?
ConnorSullivanAuthor.com is my website. In my Instagram is Connor Sullivan Author, or it might be Connor Sullivan. No, and then my Twitter handle is Connor Sullivan Books. And I do have Facebook just under Connor Sullivan, but I don't do too much on Facebook. I'm more on Twitter and Instagram, I would say.
Yeah, Facebook's for people Joe's age.
Old people. I teach this stuff. None of my class for the last year even had any Facebook sites. They look at me like, what?
Yeah.
They don't even think it's, I tell them it's number one social media platform in the world. They're like, you're kidding, right? I go,
oh no, I mean, I still, everything I do, on the other social media platforms, it all goes to Facebook. So I'm still there.
Yeah.
Just not looking at it every day.
Yeah.
They're just, the young kids just don't get it.
Yeah. The young kids want flash and quick little movies, and
TikTok.
The old fellows, like Joe's got to get his glasses on, then he's got to say, what was that? And it's gone if it's just a video.
Yeah.
It's just, doesn't work. Anyway. Well, so what's next? You got you're going into writing the next book in this series. I guess that's what's kind of coming after this.
So I just signed a 2-book deal again with Emily Bessler at Atria Books under Simon and Schuster. So I'm doing the sequel to Wolf Trap. I'm writing that right now, and then my fourth one will also be in the same series as Wolf Trap. And then after that, it's kind of, see how the series is selling, or, if I can keep going or I need to shift focus, I'll do that. But that's too far in the future for me to predict right now.
Yeah, you don't know. Hey, are you keeping kind of a Bible now, or some sort of a reference thing for your series for characters and peoples and things? Because, I mean, if you end up going 4 or 5 books in a series, right, you have to kind of keep track of that. Are you doing that right now?
Yeah, I have a lot of notes written out in the writing application that I use. So I'll have characters and physical descriptions and, what they're like that, and things that they've done in the other book. So but yeah, it's definitely been a different process writing a sequel. I've just written 2 standalones so far. So I'm learning what it's like to write a sequel, and that's it. It's easier in ways than writing standalones. And it's also a little bit harder because, I gotta kind of allude to what happened in the book before it, but not give away too much. So, if the audience likes the sequel, they can go back and read, the one before that. So
yeah, it's a little bit trickier. Well, it's been a pleasure. We're glad you came on. We'll have everything up on our website as well. We'll have your book, your website, and social media so people can find you, bother them, keep them from writing, do all that stuff. Anyway, it's been a pleasure. So the book we're talking about is Wolf Trap, a thriller, and our guest is Connor Sullivan. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. That was a blast.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or show, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.